Hello everyone, and welcome to The Ancients Part 4. We begin this finale with the crackling of radio comms between the fleet over orbit and preparations on the ground defenses. The refugees of Hyperion, now in Western Mu, or as we may refer to it as Lemuria. We see the people prepare for more weapons. During the crackling of the comms, we see people in mass moving underground. They are panicked and moving into safety. When we see the first piece of debris hit into the ocean, causing a huge blast and a giant tsunami in the region, sirens were heard globally as more debris barraged the planet. As the biggest pieces broke through and struck the Earth, shifting tectonic plates and sealing the underground caverns around the world from the surface. We pan back to the present, with battle spilling into the cities of the Earth in this time. With many refugees cut off from an exit, they begin to arm themselves and fight the battle with the Ultramen, their gods. As the fighting becomes most intense in orbit, with giant creatures attaching to the battleships commanded by Orion, he orders the remainder of his fleet to lure bigger creatures away to decrease the amount of debris falling to the planet. He orders his men to jettison into space and take the fight into their suits. We see several Ultramen leave the capital ships as they are grabbed by Dark Ones. Though increasing in their size, they are still dwarfed by the Dark Ones. They begin to blow into the Dark Ones with hand rifles and ordnance. They are able to split, and the biggest one, in half, but it ends up rejuvenated into two separate bodies. The main ships are destroyed while the EVA combat is engaged. Back on the planet, we see Hastur activate a beacon to lure his brother and nearby Darkspawn. At first, only handfuls of Darkspawn would arrive. Kronos and several remaining North Ultramen fought them off with ease, but in the distance Hastur could see the tallest tower, bodies, land on the beach from underwater. In the head of the army forming, Hastur could see his twin Cthulhu. The swarm made their way into the city, destroying it as they went further in looking for the citizens. Cthulhu stepped into the city center where Kronos was waiting for him. The Darkspawn began to swarm Kronos and Ultramen in several buildings behind and began to barrage into the horde. Kronos lit the area on fire with a black flame. The first line of swarm melted together. Overhead we see massive amounts of dropped Darkspawn fall from the sky and land on into the city. The city now filled. Hastur calls to his Ultramen and Kaiju in a last call, telling them he is activating the enclosure. A small fleet of Mothra blasts hundreds and thousands of Dark Ones, as flying fire kaiju-like Rodan species flew behind to burn those caught in the webbing. Kronos spearheaded the charging Darkspawn, killing handfuls at a time. As the Darkspawn approached the massive Kronos, they'd be burned. The largest of the Darkspawn attempts to wrap itself around Kronos whilst being burned. Another Darkspawn attaches itself to pull Kronos away from the land and towards the sea. The rest of the horde that is still mobile bypasses confrontation with Kronos and heads for the surrounding Ultramen and Hastur. The skyscrapers are torn as the temple stands still. Hastur orders his men to make for the edge of the city to spring the trap. His men defy the order and continue to drag the Dark Ones deeper into the city. He calls to Artemis and the main force of the Northern Ultramen to be ready to wipe any stragglers before coming onto the city. She tells him that she will miss him and honor his family in his absence. He asks if Furin is with her. This is when Furin places his hand on his shoulder and tells him he wouldn't abandon his brother. Though upset, they spot the main force at the head of the main street to the center, where they awaited. Furin turns to the main glass display and asks if Hastur planned on ever setting off the trap. He smirks at his brother. Kronos is rolling into buildings as he continues his fight. Several Ultramen in the area retreat to the city center. Kronos is picked up by another kaiju, as we know as Quetzalcoatl, a phoenix-looking kaiju with a dragon-looking head. He picks up Kronos and moves him away from the city. As he looks back, he blasts the nearby Dark Ones. Hastur activates the failsafe as a white force field activates over the city. The main force arrives to kill any Darkspawn that made it out of the force field. Furin turns back to the door and puts on his helm. Ready to kill a few thousand Dark Scum? He says to his brother. Do I have a choice? He says as they both chuckle. The fight begins in the center with the remaining Ultramen and several bombs dwindling down the Darkspawn's entrances. They begin to transform to their bigger Ultraman size. Cthulhu manages to sneak his way into the main fight and pulls Furin away from Hastur. Furin crashes into the main building as Hastur grabs him and slams him onto the ground. Furin headbutts Cthulhu, who then begins to transform, looking gel-like from his humanoid appearance. His head begins to change into an octopi-like face. Jelly-like wings begin to form. He attaches to Furin, who begins to change into a wolf-like appearance. While transforming, Cthulhu flings Furin into the sky towards the force field. He hits as he pushes his feet against it and is tackled by flying Dark Ones. He is pinned against the force field as Artemis arrives on top with her ship. She activates a device which grabs him out of the force field. She and her female warriors obliterate the Darkspawn. Furin begins to force himself back, where Artemis tries to hold him and one of the guards sedate him. He begins to transform back to his Ultraman self, and she informs Hastur that they managed to get Furin out. Hastur smiles and says to keep him out. She tries to convince him to reach her by the force field and she can extract him and any remaining Ultraman. He tries to reach his men, but only a handful remained. He activates a timer for how much longer until the sinking of the city. He pulls his men out and throws them towards the force field. He being the biggest, he knew he had to get them out first. As he throws the last Ultraman out, the Darkspawn stop, staring at him. Cthulhu jumps and lands in front of Hastur, where Hastur readies himself and charges. Around the world, the cities are left smoldering as the survivors cheer as they begin to overcome the odds. The White Ape Hanuman smashes through several Dark Ones in the East lands, as the apes of his clan join in as the Dark Ones charge head-on. Eastern Ultramen push back survivors into the deep of the Empire. Though most of the buildings were destroyed, they knew rebuilding could continue once they cleared the surface. We get a glimpse around the world as the other empires in the collapse, barely beating back the hordes of Dark Ones. In some parts, Ultramen were being consumed and converted to Darkspawn faster than they could be killed. Though as the men found a good defense position with choke points, they still took on many losses. Much of the wildlands were left untouched, but those that weren't had kaiju of all sorts fending off their territories. A trumpeting noise filled the sky as the larger of the creatures fell from the sky. The Ultraman's fleet from the other planets had arrived. The skies roared as the ships rerouted towards the major cities. Orion, at the head of the fleet, muttered to himself the destruction of their cities. He sighed in relief as he saw several survivor groups fighting off the hordes. He begins ordering air support to relieve the ground forces. Several flying kaiju were fighting above the capitals of each empire. Their fleet spread across the globe to cleanse the planet of the Darkspawn. We pan back to Hastur, who is bloodied and his armor is severely damaged. In his giant form, he runs against the rubble as he dispatches his wrath into the Darkspawn. As he is tackled by Cthulhu, the Darkspawn are burned. Hastur kicks back Cthulhu as he feels his hands begin to transform, with each spill of Cthulhu's green blood seeping into his torn suit. Hastur looks up to see a flying Kronos being carried by Quetzalcoatl. Kronos lands right in front of Hastur to fight Cthulhu, as Hastur regains his bearing and his strength. Quetzalcoatl burns several Dark Ones in the vicinity. The fight continues to grow as more Dark Ones have arrived from the edges of the perimeter, with only one place to go, being trapped. Hastur whispers to the kaiju to keep them busy until he can sink the city. Kronos picks up Cthulhu and splits him in half. We see him then throw his upper half as he stomps on Cthulhu's head. The body, now gel-like, starts to slowly reform as dark swarms jump onto Kronos. Kronos charges up and readies for another attack. Hearing this, Hastur hastens his work. The city begins to shift. He begins to send out a message out to his older brother deep into the galaxy in some other populated sector. He explains in summary what has transpired. He begins to tell him that he now has the mantle of responsibility of their family. The building begins to rumble as the Darkspawn begin to infiltrate, and he submits the transmission and activates the final syncing protocol. And here's where I'm ending part 4, though that also means that there will actually be a part 5. Part 4, I just had way too much to include for it to be one single part. And I'm trying to keep these videos under 15 minutes, 10 minutes is what I'm shooting for. Now, for some author notes here, one real big emphasis I wanted to put was the initial conflict around the Earth, but being magnified and focused on the Hyperborean city where Hastur is fighting. So come check out episode 5 as soon as it's out for the conclusion of the Ancients and finally get back on track with Ultraman, Gamera, and Kong 2. Sorry for this being late. When I finished the first half, I thought I'd be able to slip this in before the busy summer I had coming. Not to worry, I'm going to see if I can make several videos, but they won't have any images and this will be a test. This will cut the amount of time of getting these videos out in half. And if you guys still want one with images, I'll try to make 2 versions, but it will take quite a bit of time. So for now, I'm just trying to get these out. So hang around. I'm going to try and get Ancients Part 5 out ASAP. That means sooner than a week. And I already have it written. It's already done. Just need to record it and post it. So yeah, please let me know in the comments what you liked, what you would change, and what more you're hoping for. Part 5 is going to be out there soon, so keep an eye out for it. And we'll catch you next time. Lord Commander Guts, out. See you guys.